sure that other people who have worked across the portfolio as well would attest to that. So I only lasted about a year before jumping headfirst into podcasting, which is really something that I'd seen at Vox Media as well. Still today, you can just go and kind of do whatever you want, right? Like I saw another joke meme, for instance, where somebody called this out on X, Twitter, and then made himself the CEO of LinkedIn.
First off, frac or fiction? Fractionals need to specialize in one industry to be successful.
Yeah, I will also plug weekly Looms, and this was something that I picked up with Domestique, which I think is a great way to relay information back to your partners.
Welcome to OFRAC, the podcast where top fractional leaders share their wins, struggles, and stories from the trenches. Hosted by Adir Ron. Welcome to OFRAC, the podcast where we dive into the world of fractional leadership, the wins, the struggles, and everything in between. I'm your host, Adir Ron, and I'm a fractional CMO. And today we have with us Jack Oliphant. Jack, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. So a bit of background about Jack, our guest for today. From CNET and CBSi, Vox Media, Acast, Jack built his chops in digital media and enterprise sales and podcasting before turning founder, and now operates in a sharp, full-stack fractional exec. Jack blends RevOps, sales leadership, operational insights into a single streamlined offering, helping early stage companies make smarter GTM bets. And he's also literally Ironman. So Jack, welcome, and let's kick it off. So you finished an Ironman, you finished multiple marathons, you launched your own company. What's a skill from endurance sports that is very relevant and maybe in a surprising way relevant to fractional work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually put together my own format of crawl, walk, run, but I actually relayed it back to my own triathlon and endurance training, from a perspective of dream, train, race. So, there's a lot of mental attitude that goes into endurance training, as well as marathon and triathlon and Ironman competitions. So that dream bucket is really important to get your mental attitude right. And then from a training perspective, there's a lot of hours. There's inherently a lot of risk with running your own shop, especially from a fractional basis. So, the training and the number of hours, I think, correlates really well into the model. And then finally racing, actually implementing it with clients, getting feedback from clients. And I think there's a ton of different lessons that you can learn from endurance sports or just sport overall.
Yeah, that very much resonates. I also think that playing the long game, especially talking about Ironman competitions and marathons, you're not sprinting. You need to learn to pace yourself and plan ahead and foresee rough patches and keep running even after you were hurt. And I can definitely see the correlation now. As you were speaking, it materializes right in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with running any business, kind of the first jump into it is super scary. And especially from like a freelance or consultant perspective, you're not sure how long you're going to be doing it most times, right? People kind of dip their toes into the waters. But I've, especially over the last year and a half or so, really projected long-term growth in business. So that's what I love to help clients and partners with as well, focusing on the long term rather than these like short-term wins or gains. Every project and every partner is a little bit different. But the ones that I really love working on are focused on, a couple years out rather than the next 30, 60, 90 days. So long-term growth through operationalization is what you'll find on my website.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to the next question. What's your story, or how, because I like silly humor, how I like to call this corner is how the frack did you get here? So from CBS Interactive, from Vox Media, from Acast, all the way to being a fractional generalist. What does that even mean? How does that look like? Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I really started my career in digital media and publishing at CBS Interactive. So at the time, they had owned a portfolio of websites, including cnet.com, which was and probably is still the largest tech news and reviews website. So I got promoted. I moved across the country. I represented some of the largest accounts at the company. And so really got hands-on experience with managing many teams internally. So everything from client success to digital operations to the finance team to our marketing lead contacts. And I think that's really where I had my first interaction with revenue operations, even though they weren't necessarily calling it RevOps at the time. I was managing 5 internal teams in New York City, as well as 2 of the largest accounts at the company. So both from an internal and external perspective, I was able to gain a lot of experience at a multinational enterprise conglomerate. And so, I think that I was ready for the next step in terms of another promotion in my career. And as you work at enterprise, large corporations, that path is kind of dictated for you in terms of who's there and whether they're going to promote internally or hire externally. And so I could see just kind of the limited number of slots of folks. And so I ended up taking an external position in order to get that next promotion. Vox Media was a medium-sized publisher at the time and self-described as turbulent by the CEO. So it was definitely an interesting time to be at Vox. I'm sure that other people who have worked across the portfolio as well would attest to that. So I only lasted about a year before jumping headfirst into podcasting, which is really something that I'd seen at Vox Media as well. Watched a team of about 2 to 3 headcount go to almost 10 within 12 months. So I was able to identify that emerging platform and channel that was podcasting at the time. So then I jumped into Acast, had a ton of success. And that success was really what led me into starting my first, go at independent contracting, consulting, freelancing, whatever you'd like to call it. So I actually built.
How did that work?
Well, so I built and sold an ad product with my team internally and then rolled it out to multiple markets. By the end of my tenure at Acast, it had actually sold over $1 million in 3 markets. I also had a huge amount of success in 2020. Ended up being approximately 35% of the Americas team revenue. So, that allowed me to take a big risk in terms of starting my own shop. And this is something that I tell a lot of folks that are either getting into independent consulting, freelancing for the first time, is that if you can mitigate that risk by taking side projects with your full-time employment, so you're not giving up things that are important like healthcare, the steady paycheck, 1K, et cetera, I highly recommend that. So if you can kind of dip your toes in the water without necessarily taking the full headfirst dive in, then that's a conversation that I consistently have with folks that are looking at a first time into freelance consulting. But I definitely have a higher risk tolerance, I'd say, than a lot of folks, which is what drove me into starting my own business. And there's actually a funny economics fact. I don't know if it's still a fact because this was many years ago when I was studying econ in college, but there are only 2 things that correlate with entrepreneurship. It's either having a safety net, meaning that you're, multi-generational wealth, et cetera, or your parents were entrepreneurs. So my mom actually ran a small business throughout my entire life for music and tutorial. And I think that exposure to risk also lends itself to my own risk tolerance as well.
Interesting. I never heard of that before today. My dad was a small business owner, so I can relate. The numbers add up so far.
Anecdote of 2 here.
I'll add it to my roster of questions, and then I'll start asking the next guests. What did your parents do that led you to become a fractional?
For sure, correlation, not causation, but those are the only 2 things that correlate with becoming an entrepreneur.
Interesting. So what's why do you call yourself a fractional generalist? That's a question that I was waiting to ask.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a not a joke necessarily, but just a play on the fact that I've done a lot of different things over my career. I've worked at different companies, even, running my own business. I've taken a lot of projects. I've worked in a lot of different capacities with different teams that are all the way from like bootstrap, seed, kind of friends and family, all the way through like late stage Series D exit. So kind of one of my big skill sets is to be able to come in and identify areas for improvement and long-term growth. So with the fractional generalist tagline on LinkedIn, I think it also drives people to ask, like, what do you actually do, right?
Yes.
So it's definitely a hook a little bit in order to engage people to try to spur the conversation. But I would say for the most part, especially in the last 6 to 12 months or so, I've been solely focused on revenue operations, which I think does lend itself to that generalist title, right? You're working across multiple different teams, including sales, marketing, and CS, in order to help drive the revenue function for the overall company. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's also, you need to have a little bit of fun out there in your day-to-day.
Definitely.
And LinkedIn, I think, is a great tool, but also a place to not take yourself too seriously. There's a subreddit all about that. If you want a good laugh, LinkedIn Lunatics is quite a place on the internet.
LinkedIn Lunatics. I'll remember that one for later.
Right.
I'll check it out. I do remember I read an anecdote on LinkedIn Lunatics. I read a story about a guy who was getting contacted constantly with like AI job offers. So he built a profile for his fish and he called it like sea bass something. And the profile picture was a fish. And he built like an actual resume with the company names and the titles, but in the actual details. So he was software developer at Apple, but within a fish tank writing fish code. So it's like if a person actually takes literally more than 5 seconds to go over his profile, he would realize this is a joke. But he kept getting, because he built like resume of working at Apple and Microsoft and Google and all those companies in software development, he was getting like over 50 job offers every single day for his fish profile.
I mean, there's so much to unpack with LinkedIn right now, especially from a revenue operations perspective, and even just like validation and verification, because still today you can just go and kind of do whatever you want, right? Like I saw another joke meme, for instance, where somebody called this out on X, Twitter, and then made himself the CEO of LinkedIn, right? So like the fact that you can still kind of like manually input all of these different things without a real verification process is very interesting, especially when a lot of the enrichment and prospecting tools are using LinkedIn as its source of truth, right? So
Exactly.
If you're still taking the source of truth as manual input, like there's probably a variance of what's actually true versus what people are posting online, which is always the case in every different community. But yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is a crazy place. I've been a LinkedIn premium member for over 10 years at this point. So it's been a long part of my career path and trajectory. I mean, I still remember when they bought lynda.com and then eventually rebranded it LinkedIn Learning. So
wow, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. I know.
Remember those days? I had a Lynda subscription back then.
I did too. That's actually where I first learned Excel. That was a big miss by my college. As much as I loved CMC, where I went to school, we learned like, econ stats software, right? Econometrics is what it's called. But the software is solely for academia. There was no real life application for it. So when I got into one of my first jobs, even before CBS, I learned Excel 8 to 12 hour course on lynda.com. So yeah, it's a throwback for all the software nerds out there.
It's interesting though that you're talking about LinkedIn and you use the phrase source of truth. And I feel like that is a very RevOpsy phrase.
You got
in
me.
essence. It's a very RevOpsy perspective. You need one source of truth. That's typically the CRM. That's typically like where everything is built upon, everything comes out of, and where you spend your most of your days in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. I'm a big CRM proponent. I use HubSpot. I'm a HubSpot admin. I've also been with
Same
HubSpot
here.
for many years. I mean, I remember when they were still an email marketing tool solely as like a MailChimp competitor. And now, they're a full marketing automation platform plus CRM plus, customer service hub. There's so much that HubSpot can do at this point. But I recommend this a lot and might get into some of your other questions later on. But like I run a workshop that I'm actually doing with a HubSpot community coming up in the next couple of weeks, the ABCs of CRM and ICP for small business owners. So there's a bunch of different tools out there. You don't have to necessarily use HubSpot, and especially for what you need in terms of a small business or even like, seed to series A, you might be able to use a different tool. But I would say that if you ask most revenue operations folks, like Salesforce and HubSpot are going to be the two recommended tools, just depending on where you are as a maturity of a company. And exactly. I think for the first time in the last couple of years, HubSpot is a real competitor to Salesforce on an enterprise level. So it's going to be a very interesting landscape over the next 3 years, especially in terms of how AI and incorporation of AI just competes within the two major duopoly at this moment, right?
Yeah. I'm team HubSpot all the way, by the way.
Sure.
I have customers that are some customers that are Salesforce, and literally every single CRM conversation, I'm like, are you sure we can't migrate to HubSpot? It'll be so much easier. We'll have so much more fun. It's just such a different environment to work in a Salesforce environment than a HubSpot environment.
There are still some serious pros for Salesforce if you're a late stage enterprise or even on the verge of IPO, if you're Series D or raise, hundreds of millions of dollars and have a lot of data. But at the same time, I think that HubSpot can be the solution for a long part of that journey, if not at this point for the entire time. But there are still some very serious pros for Salesforce. And actually, while I'm plugging enablement, different tools, Salesforce's Trailhead is a really good enablement tool where you can go and learn the platform really well. And so HubSpot has their own HubSpot Academy. So if you are interested in learning more about the different tools, then each has their own respective enablement platform.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about how if you're willing to share a bit about projects that you're doing as fractional RevOps, and I'll kind of tie it to our next question, which is what's a recent Frac'd-Up moment that you had as a fractional RevOps leader?
Yeah, I'll plug Domestique, which has become a partner of mine. I'm an independent contractor for them as a revenue operations consultant. So they're a larger firm out of the Denver area, but they're also based all over the place. Right now, I believe they have 8 full-time, what they call pit crew, and then 40 plus Peloton members, which are experts across the board, just depending on whatever project that you might need. So I have my own business, Oliphant Strategies, but at the same time, I think partnering with them has been an amazing opportunity in order to get a more diverse selection of projects. So they're hiring for different roles currently. So Domestique is a cycling reference. It's the person who actually breaks the win for the Peloton behind it. Okay. So if it's kind of the leader of the pack. So definitely, I resonate with a lot of, their own internal, company values and even the different nomenclature that they have, being a cyclist myself. But yeah, no, I think that they've been an amazing partner, and it's definitely allowed me to extend past my own network in order to pull from different projects that I might not have been able to access before. So I highly recommend trying to build partnerships with either other independent consultants or, agencies along the road, because there are a ton of like fourth spaces or online communities where you can start to grow your network and get those referrals from different folks that have other expertise, right? So I already belong to a few of them, including I think where we had met, which was Next Play. So I will plug Next Play too. I've really loved that community. The Friends of Next Play has been amazing. I've also raised my hand in terms of office hours. So I run office hours for anybody that's interested in getting into fractional consulting for the first time. I have resources for folks as well, including like a tech stack recommendation for a solopreneur or small business. So yeah, I think that there's a ton of ways that you can get projects. And one interesting one currently is my engagement with Domestique. But yeah, coming back to the Frac'd-Up moment. So
yeah,
we all have those moments, right? It's definitely a learning curve in terms of, going out on your own for the first time. But there was a project, it was a couple of years ago, where I actually was a part of a potential recapitalization of a cap table. Okay. So it's a pretty...
You wrote to me about that. Yeah, I
Yes.
was waiting for you to get to that story.
Yeah, it doesn't happen all that often, actually. Recaps are, I guess, they're more common than they used to be, but for a long time, that was basically never used. And it's a way to essentially bring the cap table down to a couple of different investors or individual stakeholders. But it's pretty dramatic. So especially when you're dealing with founders or co-founders that have large stakes of equity in the company. So that experience with the board, with investors, with long-term co-founders was definitely an emotional moment throughout my fractional career, but it also taught me a lot too. So, if you've never kind of interfaced with boards or C-suite executives before, and I think that you end up doing it a lot more as a fractional person or consultant, right. It's a lot of different, I would say, personality types. So just learning the different personality types and trying to put your CS hat on and be as friendly and welcoming as possible. But yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with what a recap is, I encourage you to take a look online and see what that is, because it is a lot of drama. But that was definitely a major learning moment in my fractional journey.
What was your biggest takeaway from moment?
My biggest takeaway was the fact that co-founders have both a personal and professional relationship, especially for co-founders that have been doing it a really long time. So there's a lot of history that, like, if you're coming into a project for the first time and that company's been around for 4, 5, 10, how many years, that you don't quite understand all of the different moments in time that this company has had, right? Like they could have been sprinting for the last 24 months, just trying to hit profitability, right? They could be 10 years old and gone through multiple rounds and a lot of different history that you just won't be able to catch up on. And trying to understand where the co-founders and then also where the board is coming from is the biggest learning moment. So like trying to balance like where the co-founders are at as well as the board, if you are talking about a company that's taken investment.
Yes, it's a delicate balance act, and like finding yourself in that kind of seesaw or equation, and walking away. So it's definitely a learning moment. I can see that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe to light up the atmosphere a bit.
Yeah, sure.
We'll switch over to our quickfire round. I'll ask you a couple of short questions. So first off, frac or fiction? Fractionals need to specialize in one industry to be successful.
Friction.
Friction. Okay. Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a small business owner, you have to know a lot of different things. So I think that you can have services that are very dialed in to an expertise. You can also outsource a lot of the different things that you need in terms of support, going back to like the tech stack recommendation, whether that's like bookkeeping or taxes or invoicing or things like that. But I do think that you need some type of holistic knowledge in order to like really be a really successful fractional consultant, because when you come into a team, you aren't usually just servicing one stakeholder or champion, right? You are working with multiple different stakeholders. So while I think it's really important to, dial in your service or offering based on your expertise, I think that you do need a little bit more of a holistic background in order to be successful.
All right. What's your number one tool in your toolbox?
The CRM.
The source of truth.
Yes.
I would say HubSpot from our conversation.
Yes, I'm a HubSpot proponent, but kind of like I'd mentioned, there are a bunch of different tools that are out there that are great. Zoho comes to mind, but there's a whole bunch of them currently, and there's new ones popping up all the time as well, just because of AI and the new technology that's coming about in terms of data and enrich prospecting and sequences and all of this stuff. So there are a lot of amazing tools, and I kind of run through them in the workshop that I do.
I heard really good things about Atio.
Sure. That's also on my list.
I had a chance to play with it too much, but it looked like a very solid solution.
Yeah, so the ones that I vetted, a lot of people use Airtable as like a backend CRM just because it's more of their digital operations crux or tool. I wouldn't consider that a CRM, but could you build out a CRM within Airtable if you're an Airtable expert? Sure.
Probably,
and I've heard people say that they're doing it. That came to the top. Adio, Folk, Pipedrive.
I heard about Folk today.
Yeah.
For the first time.
And then Zoho are the ones that I kind of vet in the workshop that I do. And then a couple of others actually came up a few times are High Level and Honeybook.
I didn't know High Level. We'll check them out. Okay. Next question. Describe your dream client versus your nightmare client.
My dream client is a 12-month commitment. So
I can relate.
Yes, a long-term retainer partner is my dream client. So anything above 3 months, really, but 6 to 12-month engagement where I could properly become an integral part of the team, where they don't have to actually spend the money on a full-time hire, or full-time employee. I think that's like, where my dream would be in terms of partners, but really, 3 to 6 month engagement. And I could, build out my ICP for you here, but I think long-term partnerships versus like short-term gains, it just level sets the entire relationship, that it doesn't become just like kind of like, how many minutes did you work, this week? So, how you structure your services are really important. So I've talked a lot about that in terms of like, are you going to bill hourly versus retainer? Are you going to back end hours into retainer? How can you, kind of foresee scope creep if you do a retainer for access structure? So, depending on whether you look at it from like a large consulting, kind of the big three, right? A lot of those folks, including boutique, like medium-sized consulting firms, do day rates. They'll do day rates or weekly. And then, monthly back end and hours is also a very popular method. So there's just many different ways that you can go about it. But definitely my preferred method is a scope of work with monthly retainer.
Okay, yeah. So I was about to ask that question. So what's your favorite method? So
yeah, retainer for access.
I tend to agree.
With a scope of work. And then I typically put in front of my partners a timeline associated with the SOW as well. So we're doing weekly check-ins and making sure that we're hitting the deliverables that the scope set out to do in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. That's my favorite way to work as well. And on top of that, sometimes daily workshops. So for some customers, it's sometimes easier to start off with one-off engagements, but I don't like to do just like hourly consultations. So I found, at least for me, that doing like full day workshops, like 6-8 hours, coming in and really building something together is a solid way for a lot of prospects to for us to gauge each other and how it's like working with each other and if it's a right fit going into a more long-term engagement.
Yeah, I will also plug weekly Looms. And this was something that I picked up with Domestique, which I think is a great way to relay information back to your partners just to make sure that you're on the same page, and sending like, screen share Loom with your face, like kind of in the bottom right or left, in terms of like building that personal brand with your partners as well, and just walking them through what you had accomplished that week. So I think that's a really great method in
I
terms
love
of,
it.
just relaying information that like might not be able to be relayed in a spreadsheet or an SOW or a project management tool, right? So like, I think it adds a personal touch as well, in terms of if you're able to, or you feel comfortable with going on camera and adding your face, like kind of in the bottom left or right. But you can also do it without that functionality turned on. You can just record it and screen share. And I think that that's a really great way to level set on the weekly accomplishments or deliverables that you were able to do.
I like that idea. I'm gonna start doing that as well. So thank you.
Yeah, got to give that one to Domestique as well.
Credit is due where it's due.
Right.
So last quickfire question: where do you see the future of fractional work?
I love this question. So ballpark in the United States, 10% of the entire labor force is self-employed, and it hit a high during the pandemic, during COVID. I think it was like closer to 11 or 12%. Personally, and I've been wrong plenty of times before, so with a prediction, I'll definitely caveat that I could totally be wrong, but I only see the fractional market and labor force getting larger and larger. Kind of what validates that as well are systems and tools that are built for that market specifically. So, one that I use currently is collective.com. They're a bookkeeping, tax, and invoice system, and they are specifically built for, they reclassify you as an S corp if your revenue is high enough and it makes sense in order to actually have that S corp filing. And then another company in that kind of competitor set that I think validates this space a lot is that, like, not only is it just self-employment is about 1/10 of the market, but there are large B2B SaaS offerings, both from a managed service and a self-service perspective, that are being built to service this market as well. So Formations is another one, also kind of in the same realm as bookkeeping, taxes, etc. And then I will also call out Found, which is a self-service tool, rather than the two that I just kind of listed out, which are more managed service. And I think Found is also geared towards small businesses overall, rather than like kind of just a solopreneur aspect. But I think that on top of the fact that there are a lot of layoffs and firings, people are going to find themselves in this transition area of their career where they debate, do I go fractional for the first time because their hand is forced in some way, right?
Yeah.
The way that I kind of phrase it is, made a hard decision easy, right? So if you're laid off for the first time and you've been thinking in your own head, I think I can do this, I think I can build out my own freelance shop, then take a crack at it while you're searching for your next full-time gig, right? You can do both, where you can try to take on a project or two and see whether you like it or not, in the very similar manner if you were full-time and trying to do it on the side. So if you're in your full-time job search, like, try to pick up a project or two based on your personal relationships.
Exactly.
So, I think that the fractional market is only going to get bigger over the next 5 years.
I tend to agree. I think that I'm seeing more and more varied fractionals as well in various positions and various capacities and roles and specializations in terms of industries that they work with or things like that. So yeah. Okay, so our final question, and then we'll start wrapping things up. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's now thinking about going fractional for the first time, and we've talked a lot about this already in the episode. You gave already a couple of great pieces of advice. So one last piece of advice.
Set up a CRM immediately.
I am not surprised.
I mean, I can't stress it enough. A lot of people wait on it. You're not a computer. I mean, you're never going to remember the email that you sent to Joe or Sophia from, 6 months ago. And like those contacts and companies really do matter if you are going to stick around in this game for even 12 months, right? So, I mean, my biggest piece of advice is get a CRM, which is the easiest thing to do. You literally can get a free tool almost anywhere. I think I listed about half dozen more
Yeah.
on this chat today. And then
Yes.
my second go-to piece of advice, which is directly related into the workshop, is build out an ICP. Like just do it from the get so that you know exactly the type of project and partner that you're trying to onboard.
And that's a very, very important piece of advice. All right. So I think we'll wrap this up. Thank you, Jack, for being with me today, sharing some insights and some interesting stories and recommendations. If anyone who's listening wants to follow up or get that or be in touch, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. So, of course, my name will be spelled out, but it's Jack Oliphant. So give me a follow on LinkedIn, shoot me a DM. I'm all over the internet, so it's pretty easy to find me. But LinkedIn is the number one, and then number two would be my website. So just fill out the contact form. So it's oliphantstrategies.com, OLIPHANT.
It will be in the show notes, of course.
Awesome. Well, you got it. So I definitely would recommend just filling out the contact form. Believe it or not, it's built in Webflow by myself and then integrated with HubSpot.
Not surprising.
Yes.
Awesome. So again, thank you for being here today, and thank you for listening. And if you left this conversation, subscribe, like, share, leave a review, do the things that you do when you like a podcast. Thank you again, Jack.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the time today. And thank you everybody who made it to the end here as well. I'm always up for a chat. So if you want to reach out again, or anybody who's listening wants to reach out, please just give me a shout.
All right. Thank you.